In a new four-part series, PBS takes us inside the Native American narrative, weaving history and science with indigenous traditions. The series, titled Native America, reveals the ancient and still thriving culture of America's first people, as it explores great nations, reveals unknown cities, and shares sacred stories and history long hidden in plain sight. The series will illuminate the splendor of a past that has for too long been untold. Let's take a quick look.
Ancient civilizations from North to South America.
These buildings are all celestially aligned.
With unique systems of science, art, and writing.
This knowledge has been accumulated over thousands of years.
Connected by shared knowledge and beliefs.
The past is also part of the present.
Discover a remarkable new view of Native America.
And joining us now is Severin Fowles, an associate professor of anthropology at Barnard College and an expert who is featured in this series. Nice to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me.
I want to get to some of the specifics in a moment that you've been involved in and part of your study and is reflected in the film. But just bigger picture, why is it important for us, do you think, now to be having this discussion, the narrative about Native Americans back then?
Well, I think that we used to think we knew what the story it was of the indigenous Americas, the story of America. It was a story of conquest. It was a story about the disappearance of Native peoples from the land. And it's taken a lot of work by folks like myself who kind of study the traces of the Native past to help rewrite that story and to talk about, the extraordinary resilience of Native peoples, and so much that went on during that colonial period that never got into those traditional storybooks. So.
I think I was fascinated by having watched segments of this and having been a history major in college and thought that I've studied that area, how little I actually knew. Or maybe a better way to say it is how much I didn't know.
Yeah, I regularly have students in the classroom who come away having grown up in St. Louis, for example, and never realized that the largest pyramids in the world, at least in square footage, were just next door.
Yeah. It's a great learning process and how you illuminate these things for your students. I want to talk specifically about your realm here, right? And in the fourth episode, you were featured prominently, and it talks about the Comanche people. Mm-hmm. And I know you have done extensive research, in the field research for this. Give us a sense who they were. What should we know about the Comanche people?
Of course, the best person to answer that would be a Comanche individual, of which there are many, thriving today. And so one of the things I love about...
And that, again, might be surprising to a lot of people.
That's right. But one of the things I really love about the documentary as it came together was that they really foregrounded the voices of contemporary Comanche individuals in this case. They're a nation, they're a tribal nation with a history that has roots deeply embedded in the southern plains, but that extend off all the way to the Canadian border, down as far south as Mexico City. And they had a really strong presence, as it turns out, in Spanish colonial New Mexico, which is where I've been doing research for many, many years.
Did we know how extensive that presence was, or are we learning so much more now?
Historians of the last decade have undertaken a really extraordinary revisionist project where they've kind of uncovered a whole new way of thinking about Comanche history and demonstrating that in the 18th century, they were a truly dominant force in the American West. They adopted the horse, they took the tools of imperialism, reinvented it, and really took over regional economies. So historians have been doing some extraordinary work telling a new narrative, but archaeologists like myself who go out and try and document the traces of that on the ground, we had not been able to participate in that until very, very recently. Let
me ask you about some of that, because I think if you asked anybody out there about the Comanche, one of the first things they would say is, well, on horseback, but I would suspect people would think, well, all the Native Americans were always on horseback. Not necessarily so?
Yeah, that's not necessarily so. Well, it's not so. Right. The iconic Indian, of the, popular imagination is the Plains warrior on horseback. And indeed, it really is a kind of Comanche figure that stands as our iconic Indian in popular culture. Native North America was a radically diverse place. There were all sorts of different ways of being. that were practiced. The Plains warrior was indeed one of them. And the Comanche story is compelling in that sense, I have to say. It taps into this iconic
We think
narrative.
of them as the Comanche, as the fierce warriors, the fierce Plains warriors. Is that an accurate depiction?
You know, I think that they would be very proud to be referred to as such. I mean, what I find extraordinary about Comanche history is that, you know, they didn't just survive colonialism. They didn't just survive the invasions of Europeans. They took the tools of the invaders and they decided they were going to build an entirely new world out of that. So, you know, they refashioned themselves. This wasn't a time of decline for the Comanche at all during the colonial period. It was a time of radical expansion. And they said, if you're going to try and colonize us, we'll colonize you right back.
We'll take the best of you and we'll use it against you.
Yeah. So they really flourished during an era that we typically think of as a time of Native American decline.
How about today? How do the Comanches of today continue to embrace their traditions and their ancestors?
These are highly traditional people in many respects, as are many Native communities. They're modern. They interact in the modern world just like anyone else. But of course, they have a strong sense of tradition. And one of the really wonderful aspects of the kind of research that is spotlighted in the documentary is that it's been happening collaboratively with a lot of contemporary tribal folk.
Last question for you. As a professor who has devoted a good portion of his professional life to the study of these areas, as a teacher who wants people to know things that they don't otherwise would not know, what do you think the value is of putting together a film such as this and getting it out there for people to see?
There's no question that disabusing people of this mythology of the vanishing Indian is the single greatest accomplishment of a documentary like this. You know, but beyond that fundamental, you know, should be a sense that American history is a much more complicated story than they were taught in high school or they were taught in grade school. Indeed, if they just do a bit of research, if they follow on some of these traces that are out there in the landscape, they're going to encounter something very different, much more exciting, much more interesting.
Well, it's a fascinating film. It's a fascinating look back at a time that we thought we probably knew, but we realized we don't. And you did a marvelous job in yours. I want to take your course. I want to go travel with you on some of these
Please do.
explorations someplace. Professor, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Of course, thank
you.
you.
We appreciate your contribution to this. And a reminder for you out there, PBS's 4-part series, Native America, premieres on Tuesday, October 23rd. You should check your local listings for airtimes.